bottles and the thick bass. You know what I'm saying?
Cole likes a thick bass.
I do like a thick bass. Welcome once again to Chill Filtered, the podcast where we drink whiskey so you don't have to, but you probably should, and you probably are, and that's why we like you. This week on Chill Filtered, we have a special guest, and we'll get to that in a moment. But before I get to anything, let's talk about some business. Here's a way you can support us. We've had a good, and we'll talk about them probably next episode. We've had a few people join Patreon, and we're super grateful for that, and we'll name them next episode. But that's one way you can support us. If you've been listening for a while, if you're on episode 4 of us and you are just hooked, and you're wanting more and wanting to be a part of the community, please reach out and hit us up on patreon.com/chillfiltered. That's the business for this week. Bryan, what before we get into anything, what are you entry buzzing on?
I am entry buzzing on the only blended Scotch I have in my home, and that is the Kirkland Blended Scotch whiskey, the old Costco 1.75. Had this around for a while, and it is I didn't want to do a single malt because I'm familiar-ish with single malts. I just haven't had much blended. I know I've had Johnny Walker before, and now I have a lot of unfamiliarity here with where we're going to get today, and I'm coming at this a little more from the novice side of things. All I knew is to grab something that said blended Scotch, and maybe later we'll discuss just how on the money or off the money I was with this.
I love it.
But what about you? What are you drinking?
I am drinking I am drinking a single malt, but in relation to what we're doing today, I am drinking an independent bottling from Mossburn. I'm drinking that Altmore I've always talked about. It's a 12-year cask strength killer pour, aged in cognac. Ooh. And blowing my mind as always. So now that we've talked about things like blended Scotch and independent bottlers, I would love to introduce our guest for today. This is our last interview episode of the year, and it was kind of cool how it worked out. I was really interested in this pour because there's a big name behind it and a cool company behind it, and so we reached out. It seemed to work out, and we got ourselves. I was about to say something. We got ourselves our guest today, and his name is Karl Schoen. He is the president and CEO of The Perfect Fifth. Am I wrong in the title there, or founder?
Yes. Founder.
I love it. So Karl, I don't want to give too much away. I've read a lot on your website. I've read a lot about, how The Perfect Fifth got started, the company. Did I say The Perfect Fifth? I didn't say something wrong, did I?
Not at all.
Because I feel like I said like the fifth note before, and I was like, and I was like, that's not the name. It's The Perfect Fifth. And so
that's actually the original name.
Oh, really?
Fifth note? Yeah.
That's sweet.
It's a trademark story. We can get into that after. But yeah.
Oh, did it have to do with the company in Bangladesh or wherever it was?
No.
Okay, cool. Well, Karl, tell us about yourself a little bit, but we also love to hear about the background. Why did you even want to start a company that bottles scotches and American whiskeys? I've seen. So how did that all start? And tell us about yourself.
So first of all, thanks for having me on. It all started kind of organically, I guess, at a young age, always, my family, I come from a big whiskey family, my grandfather, father, uncles, siblings, I'm the youngest of 6. So, always had it around, at all family occasions, etc. But purely as, drinkers, no one was ever in the whiskey business or in the spirits industry. But then we got, as a kid, I always used to really enjoy looking at the bottles, at the back of the bottle, and seeing the origin. Remember, a lot of these bottles used to have like the master distiller would sign off and put a little note on it. And it was always just, again, a curiosity. And then to kind of summarize a year of, research and getting into it, we kind of, I kind of started to take a dabble as, what is this industry all about? How does it work? How do you get from, because I knew there was independent bottlers. I knew there was distilleries, kind of understanding that process. Understanding, how casks, beyond are just made, but how they enter into the market, and start doing some research, and semi-convinced, me and my family, let's go and see what this is all about and see if we can get involved. And in 2019, we bought our first cask, of actually a 30-year-old single grain Scotch.
Nice.
And then that morphed. We bought some more. Then we eventually built the brand, and I think we hit market in 2020, right after COVID. The lockdown.
Yeah, I'm sure that
a lot
was
of industries would
not
be a bad time, but somehow the alcohol industry, people were buying more than ever. So it wasn't
somehow.
Hey,
people
exactly.
needed something to do. But you've got your brother Ben, right? Is that right?
Yes, we're a family business. So I have my brother Ben, who's been with us for quite a while. He runs our sales. I have my other brother Judah, who actually recently came on board. He's also involved in sales on the West Coast. And even though not everyone in my family has an individual role, everyone is involved. This is a dinner table conversation, but potentially even too much of the time. But for example, one of our bottles has a leather thing that holds the neck hanger. My mom's one that actually makes those. Which is
cool.
And, random stuff. So, but we're family running. Which is great. We all work together.
Getting a little ahead of myself, but I saw on the signature collection they come in a wooden barrel. Do you guys hand make those, or are those sourced somewhere?
No, those are sourced.
Okay, I was gonna say they do look very, very cool.
Those, yeah.
Well, part of the reason why we hand make them is it's just a matter of because we're such small volume, right? If we have a bottle of 250 bottles, where are we getting someone to tie these leather things together? It's not practical. It's not even so it's the easiest way to do it is just to do it ourselves, and I wish I could do more in-house, if we can bottle it ourselves, we would do that also. We just,
So I got go ahead.
Since you mentioned earlier about, when you were young and you'd read the bottles and everything, I saw on the press release that we got from Amy, that press release said something about, watching your family members toast milestones, and being a big whiskey family and everything. And I was just curious, does your family have any favorites? Like if your family was toasting a milestone, is there like a big staple whiskey brand with your family or anything like that?
Well, the problem is now they get a certain brand, at a pretty good deal. So, I remember as a kid, my father's, preferences is what I remember, and it's cool to see how his palate, which I will say today is, he has a great palate, but it's evolved. He started off with the peaty stuff and the smokier stuff. I remember, an old Talisker that was, one of his favorites.
Nice.
He a lot of times brought home I think it's a Total Wine brand, Battle Hill. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but random stuff. Again, I started this young, so when I'm thinking about, the past, this maybe when I was, 10 years old, 11 years old, 12 years old, what was on the table. But now it's really going over, we're proud of our stuff. And, when you actually, when it's your baby, when everyone in the family's involved in, the brand, we're obviously going to prefer the stuff that we put out purely because we, when you put your blood, sweat, and tears into it, it just tastes different, it's when you have a whiskey at a distillery, right? You go to any given distillery in Kentucky or Scotland, it always tastes much better at the distillery. You ever notice that?
Yeah.
It tastes a lot better, right? But imagine now even we're involved in making that whiskey and putting that together. It's even it's worlds above that. A bottling can take, 6 months, a year to put together, depends on, variety of factors. So to actually, after putting all the work, all the back and forth, all the going, the attention to detail that you have to put in, even though no one notices, every word that goes in the bottle or on the box or the packaging, we put a lot of effort into that. And there's honestly probably too much back and forth and too many cooks in the kitchen on that. Actually see it and be able to enjoy it. That is really, so it's hard to really look at other brands and other whiskeys. Just, today to say, what I go for. Me personally, I've definitely been getting more involved in bourbon. As of recent, an American single malt. We do have a project we're actually working on in Kentucky, which we could talk about later. But that's nice. So that's definitely where I've been in. We'll call that research and development.
Nice.
But it depends on the day. I love trying new whiskeys, and that's what's in. I don't usually go back to whiskeys that I enjoyed in the past. I like trying something I never had before.
Yeah.
No, and mentioning getting started young, if you don't mind saying, how old are you now?
I'm 24.
24.
What?
Cool. Yeah.
That's so funny. No, that's great, man. I mean, like, it's cool to see that, like, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, technically, when you started in 2019, so were you pre-21 at that point of the
I was
company?
pre-21, but keep in mind,
Oh, funny.
Scotland's 18.
Oh
Yeah, that's
yeah,
true.
of course.
I remember on one of my earlier trips coming back from Scotland to the US, and the US passport control, he was asking me, what are you doing in Scotland? I said, I was here for work. And they, what do you do for work? I said, I'm in, whiskey barrels, independent bottling, etc. So he's like, but you're underage. He's like, so what, you're just trading the wood, like the actual like wooden barrels? I said, no. It's, first of all, it's 18 there, and it's also a company.
Yeah.
Speaking, so that was that. But he couldn't really wrap his head around, how someone under 21 could be involved in it. It sounded, a bit shady.
Let alone be the founder, yeah.
Narrow-minded Americans.
So,
exactly.
So, I feel like a lot of people that can enjoy whiskey would even think about that, would even think about, you know what, maybe I could just get my own barrels. And especially in a place like Scotland, like where I feel like, there's so many blenders in Scotland, for example, that like, it doesn't seem to me like there's certain companies in the US that would never give their barrels away. Like they would only bottle under their own name. But it seems to me like when you look up like the cask bills basically of or like the bottling bills of blended Scotch, like even what I saw on your website, it's like I saw some Glengrant in there, I saw some Ardmore in there, I saw some other big names. But I feel like a lot of people could think like, why don't I just get my own barrels and like sell my own barrels? But I mean, to me, it would be like that's probably a decent investment. Did you feel like it was like a huge investment at first, like money wise, even, or was it like worth it to just sell a little bit at a time, or was there just a lot of capital to start with, or
so here was going into it, we didn't have an actual plan. We got it. We want to buy some barrels, and yes, I looked into the investment of purely buying some barrels, treated as a commodity or as an equity, and hold on to it and sell it. I did some research on the appreciation, etc. The big issue, whiskey cask investment or whiskey barrel investment today is at its peak. I would say there's a tremendous amount of money going into it. And I don't want to speak for the entire space because we're not doing that, but the concern that we had, one of the reasons we went into bottling is, what's our exit? The only exit if you own a barrel as a whiskey investment, the only exit that there is to sell to someone that's going to bottle, right? Yeah. And obviously, given the 3 tiers, to make it simple, if a brand is selling a bottle for $100, it's going to end up on the shelf for $200. And if I'm selling to that brand that's selling for 100, they need to buy it for 50. So there is a lot of people that have to make money along the way, and as a result, the prices of what whiskey casks are today is through the roof. And it doesn't, at some point, someone down the line has to bottle that. I mean, yes, you have some private individuals that just want to have 250 bottles of some crazy whiskey. That does happen, but the majority doesn't. And it has to get bottled somehow. Either the distillery bottle it back, or an independent bottler will go and purchase those barrels and bottle it. But there's definitely a big disconnect today, especially with pricing on the wholesale market. We've slowed down our purchasing tremendously over the past 2 years. I see barrels today and casks today, not on the American side, but on the Scotch side, where the cost per bottle is equivalent to what that bottle, 25-year-old Ardmore would retail for. That's how crazy the market is. And you're buying that, you're buying a wholesale cask. And again, not saying that all casks are like that, but I've seen that, so there's definitely, there's a lot of trading amongst whiskey investors, and it does smell like a bubble, although nobody knows.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, you look at like even the American sourcing market and stuff, and it's just like, all these companies that are either starting off or just intend to get their own barrels is definitely blowing up, and makes sense to me. No, that's crazy. And so, it was, no, that's kind of cool to see how that worked.
One last question before we get into more what the company is and everything. Another thing I saw was, you're traveling all around Scotland to do this, and just out of curiosity for you on a personal question, are there any regions you particularly enjoy in Scotland?
Yeah.
Are there any particular stories of your travels around Scotland and finding barrels and anything that you want to share?
Region-wise, it's like in America, we have the Northwest, we have the Northeast, but we're in a big country. It's a very small country. There's the regions, as much as they try to, Scotland and the whiskey industry tries to market as, crazy variation. There's not much difference. I will say one of my favorite regions is the Highlands, purely because that was the first trip I ever made. Got off the plane and went straight to the Invergordon distillery of all places. We owned it. We bought an Invergordon cask to actually see it. So that definitely has and we drove, it's maybe a 3-hour drive from Edinburgh Airport. So that was, it definitely gets, the mountains and the rolling, green hills. It definitely is beautiful. In terms of specific stories, I do remember on one of my earlier trips going to a warehouse that had some very, 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 very high-end whiskey in terms of casks, some really expensive stuff, in the casks that were valued at, over 6 figures. And I remember their bottling process was they did the most basic gravity bottling. They took the barrel, they put it up on a ladder effectively. They took a tube, and that was how they dumped the barrel and bottled it. And I was just in shock. You would think, all these high-end barrels, they must be like in some, really high-tech facility or but that wasn't the case. And honestly, that's not what the industry is. And it's a good thing.
That's cool.
It's a very,
so they basically siphoned it out.
Precisely. And it was just
crazy.
But in terms of other stories, I don't know. There's a lot of stories, but nothing that really comes to mind that, would be a great share.
No, it's all good. One question I do have is, okay, so who's the final say in the selection of a barrel? Is that you?
Which part of it?
For example, you're at a distillery, they're offering you a few options of barrels to grab, and you're like, all right, I tasted all these, and this is the one I want. Are you kind of the final say there?
So just tap into one thing. We rarely buy from distilleries directly.
Most
distilleries today don't sell out barrels. The majority of barrels on the market today, one of the common ways, again, there's various ways how they enter the secondary market. One of the common ways is, older, distilleries where most of them were independent at some point. They all sold off to the conglomerates, the Diageos, et cetera. But a lot of them retained a large portfolio of barrels, which they held on to, and which they'll, sell off. Sometimes, different brands have relationships that they'll buy large parcels of barrels from other distilleries and they'll sell off smaller parcels. There's various ways that it does go. Most of the traveling around trying to find barrels, in the beginning, I called up some of the biggest distilleries, and I kid you not, they hung up on me.
Oh, wow.
And Scotland, even more than, the US market, is known for, distilleries today. Again, 40% of them are, I don't know what the number is, but a huge percentage are Diageo, and, there's very, very few independent guys left. And a multi-billion-dollar company doesn't really care to sell off 2 barrels. It doesn't, it's not in their business plan. There is a lot of traveling, though. There is, there's always about trying to find that one random person that has a barrel somewhere, or, that bought a barrel 20 years ago. And, there definitely is a lot of that. There's also people just trying to understand what the distilleries are producing, what they have produced to, if I know I want to get a Spring Wing 20-year-old, right? Or any given distillery, like a specific thing, you have to know what they're producing. Or what that's going to taste like, and then try to find it. So that's what going around definitely is a lot more often. And there are some smaller distilleries that we do have relationships with that we haven't actually released yet, but there is a lot of that.
Yeah.
So do you not get to try some of them before you buy them?
We actually, unlike most, I don't know that there's other companies in the industry, we have not bought a single barrel without sampling it first.
Okay, cool.
And back to your actual question of who has the final say. So we've been working for a long time with the blender, who was Jim Murray, obviously as well. And when I found different barrels, our policy was we don't buy a barrel or cask before we sample. We have to sample. And we've lost a lot of barrels, just get sold quicker, or
I believe it.
they don't want to give off samples, etc. We sent it to him first
Nice.
to go ahead and give us, some sort of review, his general take, and etc. And then it'll come on to my plate to make the decision from a business perspective, from a brand perspective, which direction we want to go in. So that's the process.
Oh, that's pretty cool, actually.
In general, aside from the smaller distilleries that you might have a relationship with, is most of your barrel acquisition on a secondary market?
Yes.
Gotcha. Cool. So, and this is, I guess, kind of the same question, but asked a different way. When you do go to seek out a barrel that you're interested in, when it is time to buy a barrel, what is that process like for you? Do you pick up a phone? Do you go online somewhere? Like how does it start? How does the selection process happen? And how do you ultimately end up with that barrel?
So what drew me to this industry in the beginning, and I picked up on it right away, is that it's unlike most industries today. It's very much not internet based. Obviously they're emailing, but it's relationship based. So you have to develop a network of people in the industry, suppliers, brokers, etc. And a lot of them, there's some bad characters out there. There's some people that are, again, more geared towards the whiskey investors, and but really building up that network. And there's two ways. Either I get sent, as old fashioned as literally, a text or a Excel spreadsheet over email. Here's what we got. Here's what it's going for, and I'll run the numbers. And, if something seems doable for us on a variety of factors, I'll inquire about a sample, or the other way around. For example, on this, now that we're blending, we've been trying to source a lot more of older grain whiskeys, and that's more of a process of just calling everyone, or I prefer phone calls, although most people don't. People prefer email and text. I prefer just me call you and see what you have.
No, that's super cool. So
now that we're blending, was that in reference to this Oran now that just came out that we're gonna try today? Cool. Which, by the way, to introduce what we're drinking today. Actually, I'm gonna let Karl introduce what we're drinking today. So tell us about Oran. Tell us about the two batches.
Beautiful. So we start off as independent bottlers, effectively just bottling a single cask Scotch. We morphed off with some technically American whiskey, but it really is just bourbon matured in Scotland. And then we decided to take the leap into blending. Blending obviously has a bit of a reputation for being the, just a cheaper variation of whiskey. And for good reason. Most blends out there are just a volume product. But we decided to partner with our, Jim Murray, who, obviously he's the author of the Whiskey Bible, and he's, he's well known, but we've had a good relationship for years now. And the one thing that people most people don't know is that he's been also doing blending for other distilleries and other brands for a very long time. Never public facing though, always behind the scenes. So we decided, we've always been very careful as the quality of the whiskey that we put out, which is why we have our sampling process. I'm proud to say we've never released a bad barrel. You may not love all of our whiskey because, again, whiskey is subjective, but we've only released so far pretty darn good stuff. And again, obviously, I'm slightly biased. We decided to partner with him, and the agreement simply was, we're not going to get involved at all in the blending process. We're going to give you full control. Here's our portfolio. Here's what we have. This is totally your vision. You have full artistic power to do, and final say. And that's what we did. Obviously worked hand in hand. We needed, when he has a vision for a blend and he's missing a certain piece to it, it's kind of hard to figure out what he's missing. And I mean, he knows, but it's, expressing it to him and finding that specific component, whether it's, he needs more peat, because again, a blend is layers. But anyways, back to Oran. So we got together with him and we put together our first blend. It ended up being last minute. As we were up there blending, things changed, and I can get into that. Ended up being two blends, blend number 1 and blend number 2.
Nice.
And we wanted to go and make a blend that wasn't, if you think about it, whiskey, especially single cask or single barrel whiskey, we're curating, right? We're going out and we're trying to find great barrels and then bottling it without watering it down or or chill filtering it.
Hey,
that's the name of the podcast. He said it. We got him. That's it, everybody.
No, go on, Carl.
Without messing around with it and putting it in and giving it for the public. Blending side of it is there's a lot more of art to it. There's definitely a lot. We have a lot more control over it. We have a lot more influence in the process. So that's where we wanted to step into that side, and we kind of said, hey, let's just take a crack at it. And the vision was, though, to not go with the current blends today. Most blends today, and I don't want to speak for all brands because there are some great brands out there, such as Compass Box, that have really started years ago, way before I even was thinking about getting into the industry. Started the process of making blends no longer a thing looked down upon, but try to make elevate what a Scotch blend is. So we wanted to take that a little step further. Jim's vision for our first blend was that old school style blend, which is where you get the 50-50-50. So it's 50% malt, 50% grain, 50% ABV. And this is, the blends that he recalls and he, talks about from, 50 plus years ago or 30 years ago. Then that doesn't really happen today. That's not the blends that the various whiskey companies are putting out. So that's what we wanted to accomplish. And we also we wanted the whiskey and the blend to decide what our final bottle count was, what, kind of let it organically and properly, come about itself. A lot of blends, and I still don't want to speak for everyone, but a large amount of blends and, blenders, they'll take 5 barrels, dump all the barrels together, or they'll choose barrels, but again, they're using all those barrels, and the water, obviously, you do have to proof it down. We went a bit of a different route, which is for our vision of this specific blend, what's the best whiskey we can come up with? There are whiskeys in here that we only use 3 or 4% of the barrel volume in that specific bottling. I mean, there's only 450, I think it's 460, or I don't remember the exact count.
See, 465
actually,
in each. And that's, we have majority only 2 casks used for the blends were
that's a good point.
Actually in the entire cask. I think we have total. I always forget that it's 8, 9, 10, 11. I mean, it's somewhere up there.
I saw
part of the reason why it's changed. When the way the blend process worked was that Jim was working in his lab. He had the samples from all of our different casks. But then again, things change over a couple months of maturation, and things change in the lab. I flew out there. Jim came up to our bottling facility that we were using for the blend in Scotland. And we started blending. And the initial plan was to have one blend. One of the casks that we had a turn for the worse. It was actually one sherry cask in it. So he ended up trying to redo the blend to, change the ratios a little bit to, compensate for that layer that was missing. And then we ended up, in that moment, this is, a great part of it. We're in a warehouse that had other people's barrels, and we said we need a specific type of sherry in this whiskey.
Oh, wow.
And we actually just, we didn't buy the whole cask. We just bought, I think, 20 or 30 liters from them.
Oh, that's funny.
And that was just in the moment. And, that was, and it ended up being, though, that before we found that other sherry whiskey, he was able to rectify it. And he came up with blend number 1, which was a great blend without that component. And blend number 2 was bring that sherry back in. So totally not the plan, but that's just part of the beauty of the way it works. You go in there, you got to just see what happens, and that's what happened. So
that's cool.
To summarize it up, we wanted to bring someone that really knows what they're doing. That and I believe Jim. I mean, he has experience, and I've been blown away by him. In my personal encounters with him, and putting together, just not limiting ourselves to a specific whiskey type or a specific ratio. Again, the ratio came after the fact. There's 24-year-old Glen Grant there. There's 30-something-year-old Invergordon in there. There's some old whiskeys and there's some young whiskeys. So we don't want to be limited by anything. The idea was to try to put the best whiskey blend that we possibly can make, and that's what we did. That's cool. Here. And go ahead.
No, yeah, it's a separate question.
So and the one thing that we also wanted to bring in is, as an independent bottler, what we effectively do is we find one-offs. We go around finding a cask, great unique whiskey, whether it's an Altmore or a Macallan or whatever it may be. When you try it, it's going to taste like that distillery, but it's going to be different. That's just the nature of a single cask or a single barrel. we want to take that same thing with blends. So each blend, that's why we number blend number 1, blend number 2, and our future, future ones, there won't necessarily be consistency in terms of, they're all going to be one-offs. Blend number 3 is not going to taste, it may or may not, who knows? But the idea is we have visions, we have ideas, actually blend those together, releasing them, moving on to the next. So the consistency really for us is quality, not necessarily consistency in flavor profile from release to release. And that's what we're taking from independent bottling.
Yeah, and they won't be evolutions on a previous one. They'll all be their own individual things, correct?
Correct. Exactly.
That's cool. So who reached out to who? Did you reach out to Jim, or did Jim reach out to you originally?
We definitely reached out to him. We've been building a relationship with him for some time now. Again, he's been our quality control, for lack of a better word, on our and it took, he was been very hesitant. Obviously, he's, there's always a lot of talk of him taking money for awards. I can tell you right now, he hasn't taken a penny for his awards. The guy's not living.
Not from Glen Grant.
Bryan, or you can even say, people say Sazerac, because they
exactly.
But we built a relationship based off of trust, and that's
cool.
Him, and quality. He's really, really into his whiskey, as you can imagine. He puts together a book every single year.
Yeah,
and what he would have never considered going public with a brand unless he had that control and had that ability. He wants to put out good whiskey. It's not about commercializing every component that you possibly can.
Yeah.
He has put out great whiskey. So that relationship has been building since, I think, 2020 or 2021. Not that long, but again, for the better part of my whiskey career. So we actually became close, and then that morphed into, hey, why don't we do this? So we reached out to him. It took some convincing to do.
Really?
Well, absolutely. Because, a lot of, he doesn't get paid. Obviously he gets compensated, but he does not, his compensation is not reflected on how the whiskey sells.
Totally.
So and for example, our whiskey's not listed in the Whiskey Bible this year. We took certain steps to try to, we want him public facing. We think it's mutually beneficial, but also to not, impede on him being a whiskey critic.
Totally.
Right.
No, I love that. Yeah, I was just telling Bryan before we recorded, looking through some of the notes in my 2015 Whiskey Bible. It was cool to see, I enjoy his descriptions of things. I just pulled up a random page, and even just his notes on certain things. The delivery amazes. Even after 30 years of tasting the rare fruits of this distillery, I was still taken aback by the beautifully fragile nature of the fruit, which is first to show. I don't know, he's poetic in a very good whiskey way, and I figure you probably got a solid guy. If it's like what's a Richard Patterson? They call him the nose. More so because of his tasting ability rather than his, they call him that because of his tasting ability and nosing ability, of course. But yet he makes whiskey as well. And so I would trust someone like Richard Patterson at Dalmore. But with someone like Jim Murray, I'm like, hey, he's got to know what he's doing after all these years. And especially because he's had experience blending. And from what we've learned, especially in recent episodes, is blending is not easy. Whether it's American whiskey or Scotch, it doesn't sound like it's as simple as it sounds. Hey, you got a good whiskey here, you got a good whiskey here, blend them together, you got an even better whiskey. It sounds like that's not really the case usually.
And identifying what component you're missing too sounds
totally
just difficult.
Yeah. So we had a question about Oran. Is that I don't know if you can answer this, but there's single grain, there's single malt in it, half and half, and in terms of volume, it sounds. And we were wondering if that single grain, is it all barley, or is it like typical single grain where it's got a little bit of maybe corn or rye or wheat in it?
Great question. So single grain Scotch typically is not majority barley. It's kind of like more of a bourbon mash bill.
Yeah.
Back in the day, there's this, I think it was about 20 plus years ago, all single grain was primarily corn. Over there, though, prices flipped. Primarily now, it's the 51% plus is going to be wheat today because it's cheaper. And so it's fairly cheaper whiskey. But the corn stuff, the older single grains, in my opinion, and I would say, Jim definitely agrees on this one, that's far superior to what they're putting out today. So one of the biggest challenges for blends today is finding good single grain, because you have to find older single grain.
Totally. Yeah. And I saw like 30-year-old or 34-year-old single grain as 30% or no, 20% of the mash bill on number one. Or is it, yeah, number one. And then 21-year single grain was 30% of the mash bill, which is really impressive.
Yeah. So given that is a 34-year single grain, you're saying that's majority corn, probably because the price for corn was cheaper back then. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Meaning
cool.
they always, single grain was almost always done with corn back in those days.
That
only changed in the past 20 years when, the prices, I don't know if the prices switched or they decided, hey, wheat's cheaper, let's go with wheat. I'm not sure as to the exact history of it, but most of the younger single grains today are going to be made out of wheat.
Well, you did say about 20 years ago, and the single grain contributions are 21 and 34. So it sounds like you were strategically going after corn.
Yes. Yes. Well, because when you think about it, it's bourbon made in Scotland. I mean, that's kind of what it is.
Yep. Given we got 2 samples to drink, you think we should start opening them up?
Let's crack them open. What do you say we drink? What should we drink? Number 1 fully and then number 2 fully? That's what I think.
Well, they are.
Yeah.
I
guess they are similar.
So they're not just similar. They're very, very similar blend bills, we'll call them.
Yeah.
In terms of what's actually inside of it. So being able to see that interplay back and forth, I always recommend that.
Okay. Yeah, let's do that. Let's go back and forth.
Nice.
Thanks for sending these samples over.
Yeah, thank you very much.
We're very appreciative.
See, unlike most of those are hand bottled and hand labeled by me.
Nice.
Very cool.
From the founder. That's super cool.
Okay. I gotta arrange this so I don't forget which one's which here.
Yeah, I got to do the same. I, for some reason, more on move, asked Karl to grab some ice, and then I forgot to get ice myself. So
nice.
I'll grab that in a moment, but first we'll drink it neat. I say, let's get into to batch 1. Ooh, I like that nose so far.
So just to give you a quick one, blend number 1 is exclusively ex-bourbon barrel.
Okay. Nice.
Blend number 2 has 1 sherry component into it.
Nice.
Gotcha. And so blend number 1 doesn't have any sherry components, correct?
Correct.
Cool. First note I'm getting off the nose is just a very bright nose. It's hard to explain, but definitely pears, but not like sharp pear flavor. I'm getting a lot of pears, which can be, typical of certain scotches. There is almost like a charcoal fire note to it, which you can easily get on some Highland scotches.
Yeah, a little bit of smoky, yeah.
But not like a smoky, but more like a charcoal smoke, as opposed to like a peat smoke or anything like that.
Yeah. I like the pear note too, light fruit.
It's definitely not. I mean, it's funny, you say there's no, especially on blend number 1, there's no sherry. It is noticeable that at least when you think of like sherry finished or sherry aged scotches, you think of more of a depthy, brown sugary, sherry-y, berries, those kind of notes. I'm not getting like berries, or I'm getting a little bit of brown sugar, but not in like a, like what you'd expect of a sherry aged, like a sherry butt aged scotch. Yeah, every time I sniff a scotch these days, I always think of Richard Patterson saying, "I'll kill you."
Hey, I was actually holding mine with the bottom, so he can't kill me today.
Yeah, he's gonna get me. One day he's gonna find me. Yeah, great nose. A little bit, okay, a little bit of apples as opposed to just pears. Apple juice, even compared to that.
Definitely in terms of the sherry expectation. I pulled it up here just to refresh my memory, only 6.3% of the total blend on the blend number 2 is sherry. So it's not like a, huge component. It's a component, and it's definitely noticeable. It's a layer.
Yeah. This it's a thicker mouthfeel. So I went ahead and sipped. I'm definitely there's a thicker creamy sweetness that's holding it together. That and a little bit of pepper for me too, like a pleasant little bit of pepper. It's got some body to it. There's not as much fruit on the palate as I expected with the nose, but it is very there's substance here. It's kind of thicker. I like it.
Yeah, I really like your note, Bryan, of peppery.
Like a fresh cracked pepper.
Yeah. Normally I'm not. Normally I don't pick up that note, but here I am, and it's it's very pleasant. And normally I'll get, like, if anything, like white pepper, and like a softer, like a pink peppercorn or something like that, like a softer pepper. But this is definitely like black pepper in a really good way. One of the other notes, it is a little bit pretty like complex. Like, you are getting waves of flavor, which I dig. Yeah, fruitiness. If anything, just apples and pears. Yeah, I like this. And a good proof too.
And I know that well, correct me if I'm wrong, but perfect fifth, y'all are about the music musical notes and different layers, and like how a first and a fifth would make a nice little chord. The layers that I'm getting are like a smoky pepper layer, and then a lighter pear apple fruit. Those are the two. That's my first and fifth that are coming together here for me.
I like it.
Are you guys a musical family? Is music big for you guys?
That's kind of, are we? We're not musicians, all of us, but definitely musical.
That's cool.
Some of us are, some of us are not. But that's really what drove it, and the similarities between whiskey and music are definitely there. And that's kind of what we wanted to tap into. The feeling you get when you hear a great song, or the feeling you get when you try a great whiskey, they're kind of similar. And they're both two things that you do, when you're relaxing with family or whatever it may be, enjoyable moments.
Yeah. Do you play any instruments?
Let's say no.
Does that mean you used to and haven't in 15 years?
Never properly. I never put enough effort, but I definitely have dabbled in, music in general.
Gotcha. I grew up super musical. My mom was a vocal music teacher for like 20 years, and I've played almost every instrument but woodwinds. Really? Could never do woodwinds. Couldn't do saxophone or anything with a reed like that. All it would do was honk. Couldn't get anything out of it. But number one, definitely piano. I play classical piano. I like Chopin. Like to play Chopin the most.
Isn't it Chopin?
Not to me.
We'll have to talk about that later, Bryan. That's pretty cool.
Cool.
Another note I was getting off of the neat pour on the palate was honey. Nice honey note. I just added a little water. Yeah.
Oh, I went to neat number 2 actually.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. That's what we were doing. I will save that one. Ooh, it is different.
2. Yeah, it's
slightly.
Yeah.
What I've loved, I've tried, various people on it, obviously family members, even, there's a couple bars and stores that I have a relationship with, to actually go out and speak to them. What I love is just the variation in which people prefer one over the other, which is, I personally actually switch all the time. Every time I sit down and, I try them, even mid-tasting, you start off blend number 1, you go blend number 2, and you're like, I kind of prefer blend number 1, but later on blend number 2 comes better for me. I flip back and forth.
Yeah.
That tends, people split different ways, and it comes down to your palate and what you prefer.
Yeah. going back and forth, I'm getting a very clear distinction here of
Mhm.
number one being grassy, grainy. I'm definitely getting like a fresh cut, not grass, but like you're in a barley field kind of grainy nose. And number two just seems like sweeter, like it's more well-rounded with fruit. It's too easy to convince myself it's just the sherry. I know it's only 6 or so percent, but it doesn't have the dry graininess that I was getting on number one.
Keep in mind, it's the addition of the sherry component and what else they took away, right? Meaning which whiskey is not in there, or which, how much less a certain cask
that
was providing what you're referring to is no longer there.
Yeah.
So they're different. I mean, they're similar, but they're different, and it's pretty. What I was fascinated by when I tried these, and again, the final product, because it took, I was there during the blending, so I was able, I was lucky enough to, be there and be part of the process. But to actually see the similarities, but really see the differences, even though I see, you see the percentages that they're small in terms of the variation.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool to see that. What was your take on that in terms of the variations between both blends?
Cole, did you have any nose notes or anything between the two?
The more I side by side them, I can't even tell the difference, to be honest.
I'm going back
at least on the nose. On the nose, there might be the slightest. We tried the batch 8 of Found North recently, and there was a nice note there, and it sounds weird, but it was an amazing note. It was like a sour. The Sauternes like cask really added this beautiful sour note, and I'm getting a tiniest bit. If there is a difference on my palate, I mean my nose, it's the slightest bit on that like sherry Sauternes, that kind of like wine, fortified wine kind of finish. But it's slight, if at all, and I might be just telling myself that. So.
Yeah, number one to me is definitely like a drier, a little more tannic almost. Like I'm feeling it on the sides of my tongue, kind of corners of my mouth. Little tart and kind of, I know bright's a terrible descriptor, but like a bright fruit, grassy, and number two is more well-rounded with some kind of darker fruit sweetness. The sweetness takes away that tartness that I get on number one.
So I prefer the finish of blend number one. It is more honey. This I can tell the difference of. There is a finish on number two that is where the alcohol bite comes in a little bit more to me, that I like but don't love as much as blend number one. So that's why I like blend number one on the palate especially more.
Yeah, number two does, I think, come across like, if I were to guess which one is higher proof, even though they're the same, I think I would guess number two is higher proof.
Me too. Yeah.
I think it's that, that quote unquote sherry spice that, that potentially comes in there. Do you guys, generally speaking, prefer bourbon or single malt?
I typically prefer bourbon. I'm much more of an open to single malt. I have my favorites for sure. I dabble quite a bit in Scotch and single malts. And actually, we last episode we had an American single malt master blender on, or 2 episodes from when this one comes out. We had Mark Viertaler of what's it called, Whiskey Del Bach, and he does some killer single malts. Some of the best I've ever had in terms of the American spectrum. But yes, I love Scotch, but I think I like bourbon more and like American whiskey more.
So what I've seen, we actually sent Amy some samples, and as you can imagine, Amy's she's a bourbon girl. Given
totally, Sazerac background, yeah.
She preferred blend number one. It has more of that sweeter sweetness where the sherry doesn't. It brings in more spice, and I think that I was just asking because I was I like to keep in mind what people prefer and why it is, and I find that the bourbon drinkers go for blend number 1 over blend number 2 because it has more of that familiarity with the sweetness.
So did Jim prefer number 2, or did he even give his opinion?
I definitely asked him. I did not get a straight answer.
That's funny.
It's literally asking someone, which kid is your favorite?
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
And it's literally what you're doing.
Yeah.
I'm really seeing that spice on number 2 though. That is what the finish is it's that spice. It's almost like a chili pepper spice to me. Just the way like a mild chili pepper would leave a lingering heat surrounding your whole mouth. That's kind of what I get with number 2. I think I do prefer number 2, even though I am a big time bourbon guy too. I've hardly ever, I'm not sure I've ever had a Scotch I didn't like. I do really like Scotches, but what I end up getting for myself at home is usually bourbon.
It's typically more approachable in terms of price point. It ages for longer. It's more expensive, so it's
true.
And especially today, you can find a great bottle of bourbon for $40. You really can.
Oh yeah, Wild Turkey 101. Like value king.
Much harder to do that when it comes to single malt Scotch.
Yeah.
So does all of your bottling happen in Scotland?
All of currently, yes. So single Scotch has to legally be bottled.
That's true. Scotland. Didn't even think of that.
Yeah.
Our bourbon. So we bought a while back 5 barrels of Heaven Hill. Although I will not say Heaven Hill. We released our first one last year, an 11-year-old. These were all matured in Scotland. So they started off in Kentucky, made their way over. So you have, we just bottled and we released our second of those 5, and that's it's a 14-year-old.
Nice.
And again, we're calling it American whiskey.
Even though it's technically bourbon.
Technically bourbon, we can call it bourbon. I had a couple of concerns of things that I couldn't verify. One of those concerns is the ABV was high, was higher, and in Scotland, ABV doesn't typically go up. So out of an abundance of caution, I said, let me call it American whiskey because I don't want to call it something that that it's not. And we have a pretty good trail back, but the problem is when you have a company that's large and they sold off some barrels, they're not getting back to you to help you with the provenance of that barrel. But we just bottled and released our 14-year-old, which was matured and bottled in Scotland.
That's cool.
That's under the County Gate brand, and we call that internally the Born and Bottled series. So born in Kentucky, matured and bottled in Scotland.
I was just looking on your website for that. In your shop section, I'm seeing the 11-year of the Canning Gate. I'm seeing the 11-year and that 24, but I'm not seeing the 14. Is it on there?
14's not on the website yet.
That's cool. Oh, yeah. Okay, good.
Yeah, it'll be on in the next 2 weeks, I would say.
Cool. So 14-year, it's Heaven Hill, and its entire aging was in Scotland?
No.
Just
started off. So legally speaking, right? Actually, the first time we got TTB approval on our label, they actually reached out to us with questions. And we're not the first ones to bottle an American whiskey that was matured in Scotland, but I guess for whatever reason they decided someone actually looked at what they were going to approve. Yeah, and they couldn't wrap their head around it. But I looked closely at the regulations. Whiskey bourbon does not have to be matured in Kentucky. At best, it has to be maybe for a day. Same with virgin oak, by the way. It doesn't even have to be. It can be in virgin oak for 1 day, and it is now matured for the rest of its life.
Still bourbon.
Correct. Although I have yet to see people that really do that because there's not really any point in doing that. So they definitely had a lot of questions as to one of the big issues is, do we put product of the United States or product of Scotland on this bottle? And that was definitely back and forth, and ultimately we had to put product of Scotland.
Oh wow,
interesting.
From the TTB.
From the TTB.
Yeah,
that
was the only way they would let you export it from Scotland or something.
Bring it back in. That was and I'm sure if we were we're tiny, so no one's really looking at us. But if we were big enough, the SWA probably wouldn't love it either. On the Scottish side, they don't like non-Scotch. I think even now, well, not I think, I have a contact at the SWA that I generally like to send our labels or our new types of brands to them to just give a quick glance. Like,
you got to be on their good side.
Yeah, and again, we don't know what we don't know. So I sent him over. This was years ago. Our American whiskey, and I maybe shouldn't be saying this, but I'll say it anyways. I sent him over the American 11-year-old D, which is a Heaven Hill, but it does not say that on the label. And he emailed me back. He's like, just want to let you know that it is illegal to mature and bottle non-Scotch in Scotland. And just giving you a heads up, he's being very nice about it. So
the SWA guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna he didn't he was nice about it, but I didn't send him a new iteration of it, but
yeah.
Whatever. It was bottled somewhere in the UK. I guess we'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Interesting. Brian, if you're not familiar with the SWA and listeners, SWA is the Scotch Whisky Association, which is like the like the body of, like where basically like they've filed lawsuits against American whiskeys. They call themselves Highland style whiskeys because they're like, you can't do that, not according to like our rules. And it's like, there's Scotland laws and there's American laws, but like I think they got Virginia Distilling Company to change the name of their Highland style American single malt because of those they're pretty strict.
Hopefully they don't come after Del Bach about Ode to Isla.
That's
true. You never know. Yeah, that's true. That's the exact same thing. Yeah.
Right. They have a reputation. They've gone after brands for just having a name that says the word Glen in it. I mean,
wow.
Oh yeah, that's right. I've heard about that.
Crazy.
Yeah. Imagine Del Bach having to stop making Ode to Isla. Talk about collector's items.
Seriously, that would be cool. Yeah.
No, it would not be cool, Cole.
If someone from their legal team knows about it, they will send a cease and desist. They are very, very, very proactive.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll cut all that out of this episode.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, Mark. No. No, I love that.
And before we move on from the Canongate stuff, do you have a price set? Do you have a MSRP for that 14-year?
We have it set. I want to say retail again because we don't sell retail. We do have on our website. That's just based on what the everyone else's prices is.
Yeah,
I want to say 170 something per bottle.
Okay,
nice.
We try to.
That's hard too with importing to the U.S. after being exported from the U.S.
Correct. We do everything cash. Barrel strength or cash strength, whatever you want to call it, and it's 14 years old.
What's the proof looking like on that one?
I have to look it up for you if you guys like.
Yeah, because 14-year Heaven Hill juice.
Because that'd be up there. I am super intrigued by that. That would make a good podcast episode.
Seriously,
I might have to end up with one of those.
I'm guessing like 135 for a 14-year Heaven Hill, but it was aged in Scotland partially.
Right. So yeah, that ABV. If it was
4.4%.
I'm sorry. Could you repeat that?
64.4%.
Okay, so I was
64.4. Cool.
Okay.
64.4.
I imagine it's like an Elijah Craig barrel proof at that point, or better than your.
I've actually done a side by side. So what's really, obviously when it was made in Kentucky but matured in Scotland, it's not just a marketing gimmick, believe it or not. I mean, the biggest thing that has influence on a whiskey is the maturation process.
Yeah.
Obviously that's the wood, but the environment itself. In Kentucky, if you have a barrel, I mean, Sazerac will tell you this all day, or any guys will tell you, the barrels on top of the rick house are going to be vastly different than the barrels on the ground floor because it gets 20, 30 degrees hotter there. In the U.S. and Kentucky's obviously the majority of it, you have a lot more variation in climate. It gets a lot hotter. Scotland is very, very mild, so it doesn't really get that cold and it doesn't get that hot. So it's the analogy I give is slow cooking versus putting something straight on the grill.
Yeah.
It's cool though about starting off in Kentucky, moving over to Scotland, you kind of almost like a reverse sear. You kind of started off with that process, and then you slow it down for a couple years over there, which is why a lot of bourbon. But a lot of bourbon at 14 years old in a barrel, in a virgin oak barrel in Kentucky, that would go, that would get over oaked very quickly.
Oh yeah.
So that's kind of playing with both, and it's unique, that's for sure. I mean, it's bourbon, but it's not your typical bourbon.
That's cool. And I love Heaven Hill in general too. So tasting something like that would be right up my alley. Getting to see how it tastes after such a unique process happened to it. That sounds super fun. The I noticed that in the Canongate, the 24 year is a Scotch. So the 11 years in American whiskey, 14 is American whiskey. So the 24 is a Scotch. What's the story with that 24?
So 24 year olds, that's a regular independent bottling. So that's from a Glen distillery.
Okay, I'm with you. And that leads me to a even larger question about the whole thing, is just what the differences between your different collections are. But maybe I'm getting so ahead of myself there. Have you done ice yet, Cole? Where are you at on like tasting?
Water. I'm still finishing up the water.
So water. Okay. I did just finish my water, and I'm stuck on that batch 2 with that spice. I really, really like that spice on the finish of batch 2. So I think that's where I land in terms of favorite. I will go ahead and drop an ice cube though.
It is with water actually brought in a lot more like volatility to it, and I mean that in like the alcohol vapors. It and not in a bad way, but it like didn't make it like lighter to me, flavor or proof. It felt more potent.
Both batches.
Yeah.
It took away the grassiness of batch 1 for me, and it kind of rounded that out. I wasn't getting as much tart. I wasn't getting any of that side of the tongue, corners of the cheeks that I mentioned earlier on the batch 1. It kind of rounded all that out and made it more of a smooth honey to me.
So I have a dilemma. I hear my daughter outside the door, and she would be like, "Oh, Daddy, let's play." And so if I get the ice, well, let me know what you think of your ice pour, Brian.
Yeah,
I can see if it's worth it.
He's done. Daddy's done.
Yeah, exactly. She wouldn't want to see that. She would have a hard time with that.
I'm getting way more smoke on the nose of batch 1 with ice. I didn't drop ice in batch 2 yet because I didn't want it to just all melt right away. So hold on, let me start chugging.
Let's see.
Oh, actually, I do like the ice on batch 1.
Let's do this.
You might pause the episode for a sec or something. While Cole is gone, if we don't pause the episode while Cole is gone, okay, he's writing down numbers, so we're definitely pausing the episode. I don't want you to go through a whole spiel and then have to do it again later.
I'll pause. I'm gonna take a.
So, do you ever put ice in your whiskeys to try them out or anything with ice, or are you kind of anti-ice, or what do you think?
I'm not anti-ice. I hate those people that try to tell you how to drink your whiskey, and drink it how you enjoy it. I personally prefer. I am a purist, but I don't push on everybody else. Whiskey's alcohol, especially whiskey, is about enjoying yourself on your off time and doing it how you like to do it and hanging out. If you enjoy ice, go for it.
Yep.
There are those people that'll, Jim, for example, would get very upset if he was here and you were putting ice in his blend.
Well, don't tell him I did it.
I hope you can tell Jim to listen to this or watch this episode, because then I'll feel so cool about myself that Jim freaking Murray listened to our podcast. Yeah. Too. He hates us.
You may get like an email with like a couple notes about how to taste the whiskey correctly. He's very into something, which I will say I see, I have noticed a difference. He actually likes to warm up his whiskey.
Yeah, I learned that from him. At the bottom.
Exactly.
Put your hand over the top, he normally says to do.
Right. So that's how they do, when he's actually in the lab or in the bottling facility blending, he just has a water heater there. That's to a specific temperature. He just puts a glass in to make it quick.
It's like sous vide. It's like cooking sous vide.
Yeah,
exactly. It's not. It's just warm. Especially in a warehouse. There's not really any HVAC. It gets pretty cold. It'll get 40, 50, and you get that ice effect without putting ice in. But yeah, that's he'll send you an email on how to do that. And I went to go visit him with a former colleague, and he had cologne on, and Jim was upset. He's like, I can't try whiskey now for a week.
He says that in his book. Do not wear like cologne or beard oil or anything like that. I remember reading that.
That's funny.
He's a stickler. And what's funny is, look, I have a decent palate, right? I'm not gonna, but I guess we'll cut him some slack if you have that good of a palate, and your palate and your nose is that sensitive when it comes to trying whiskey. Then I guess a little perfume or cologne is going to really affect your ability. It kind of is that is his living, right?
Yeah, true. Us common folk might just have no idea.
We'll just go for another sip.
Yeah.
I want to read from the 2015 Whiskey Bible in The Murray Method. I respect this guy, so I don't mean to say anything, but it's funny how different we are. It says in number 7 of the Murray Method, he says, don't add water, whatever anyone tells you. It releases aromas, but can mean the whiskey falls below 40%, so it is no longer whiskey. Also, its ability to release flavors and aromas diminish quite quickly. Never add ridiculous whiskey rocks or other supposed tasting aids. Warm the undiluted whiskey, and he goes on. But hey, to each his own. Even Jim Murray, to each his own. But I hope you reach out to Jim and be like, hey, have a listen to this YouTube thing or this podcast thing. And then I'll feel so good about myself that like Jim Murray has heard my voice. That's pretty much why I want you to say it. So anyway, I'm going to add some ice.
Yeah, I wouldn't have had you go get ice if I didn't think it was worth it. This, like, I know typically probably about 80% of the time we add ice to something and we're just like, yeah, okay, whatever. But this brought out a lot of honey sweet for me and smokiness. So honey sweet, smoky. It even more than neat. Yeah. Just
give it the old spin, Jay.
Set your expectations.
Ooh, the nose is incredible. This might be my favorite nose. Just much more bright. The honey mixed with the apple juice is really showing up. Nice and bright.
Drop cubes. What'd you say?
Number one.
He's on number 1. I just put cubes in number 2.
Light notes of raisins, but not like dark raisins, like white raisins. Yeah, the honey shows up a lot more. There is a much more obvious mouthfeel to it, more viscous. That honey, like I said. Sorry, Jim, but I think you made a good batch for ice. And we normally don't say that ice is the best pour, but so far I'm loving this ice pour. It's just really refreshing. And it's still got all the great notes of the neat, but just a little more brightened.
Yeah, I think batch 2 didn't change too much. Didn't get worse. It didn't get bitter or anything. Well, actually, maybe it did get a little bit bitter with the ice on batch 2. So I don't think ice did much for batch 2 there, but it was really cool that it did so much for batch 1.
Mm-hmm. I guess I'm not really surprised. It's those small variations that can really just change a whiskey. So yeah. Probably the same reason why he's so against it. If it didn't actually change a whiskey, he wouldn't. He probably wouldn't be that zealous about it.
True.
I think blend 2, the sherry's noticeable here. Before I was like unsure, maybe a little bit, but I think with the ice pour, it adds a little bit of just sherry notes. Kind of that raisiny, brown sugary. A little more on
brown sugar for sure. Yeah.
All right, Brian.
Yeah.
Between the two, what's your favorite?
Batch 2. Yeah, I like that spice on batch 2.
I'm gonna go batch 1. Oh, go ahead.
No, you're good. I was just gonna rattle on.
Gonna go batch 1. I appreciate both of them. They're both great, but I don't love the spice from the sherry barrel as much as I do kind of the like that spice is enjoyable, but I think without it, it's even better. So. Yeah, that's what I have to say. Number 1 for me.
I did tell you guys before we tend to have a pretty even split in terms of preference. I think And every taste that I've had with multiple people, it's always been a split.
That's
Nice.
funny.
That's good though. That's good though, because then one batch isn't heralded as like the one nobody likes.
That's true.
It's great, but it's also what we intended to do after we came up with the blends. We kind of we release them together. That and they are similar.
Yeah.
Do you guys see more similarities or differences when it comes to these blends?
Much more similarities. Oh, really? No, yeah, they're very similar to me.
Even split.
Yeah.
My
the only thing different. Yeah.
Yeah, there were notes on each there were more that popped out in my head for me on each that I didn't get on the other one. And maybe I was searching for all those differences. I mean, I probably was, because I like to do A/B comparisons. I like to dig and figure out what that one is and this one isn't. So I might have just gone into this with that mindset of like, okay, how are these different, rather than being a little more objective about it.
Yeah. No, I think they're extremely similar whiskeys. The only thing I can notice that was different was that slight spicy, potentially like slightest amount of bitter note on batch 2 or blend 2. Still both great, but yeah, I think they're much more similar than they are different to me.
So nice. I almost get on blend number 1, more of that little sweet peat comes in that you don't, I think that the sherry masks. The one thing that really came out of these blends, which I was really totally, I mean, we were definitely not, going about this. There's a lot of whiskey drinkers, or people that don't even necessarily love whiskey, or, they may be bourbon drinkers, don't love Scotch. And people like, a word I hear a lot, especially people that don't drink a lot, is they like smooth whiskey. And,
so
especially, smooth. Exactly. So I always, a lot of people that I know, I'm friends with, that's what they're going for. They're going for a smooth whiskey, an easy whiskey to drink. So, you would think, on the high whiskey side, it'll be smoother. Very much not necessarily the case. The thing that I picked up, and I tried a decent amount of whiskeys, and I'm curious if you guys agree, they seem to be a lot more approachable. They're complex. I mean, they have layers, but they're not overpowering. It's a really, really good balance. So if you want to get a little bit of peat without getting a full, peat monster, you can, or get a little bit of sherry, get a little, you can almost, the blend makes it very easy for someone that doesn't have a quote unquote sophisticated palate, or someone that hasn't been a whiskey drinker for that long, to actually notice a couple different things. I mean, I personally have a hard time, being able to identify what I'm tasting. People talk about a palate, etc. I think it's more about being able to associate words with what you're tasting than actually being able to taste different things. I feel that this is a very simple whiskey in a good way. You're able to see the different components as opposed to just a alcohol rush. I mean, I talk about whiskey in my family. My mother does not drink, at all. And she tried it and she's like, wow, I could see why somebody would enjoy this.
Nice. Yeah.
Not that she enjoys it, but I can see why someone would like this.
Yeah.
That was the best, that was, out of all the comments I've ever had on my whiskey, that was the best one for someone.
That's such a nice mom thing to say.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's great.
But that's my take. And also from a bourbon drinker getting into single malt, especially that blend number 1. And again, I'm obviously biased, and I drink, but I drink plenty of bourbon and single malt. I thought it was a little bit approachable, compared to a lot of the single malts out there. If you go for, very peaty or smoky, that really turns a lot of bourbon drinkers off.
Yeah.
But it has Scottish elements. It is a Scotch whiskey. There's no doubt about that. But it's an approachable one, and it's not our intention at all. But this is a whiskey that I feel that really caters to both the connoisseur and someone that isn't the biggest whiskey drinker yet, or getting into it, or has a whiskey randomly. That's what I felt. It can go both those directions. That was, again, after I tried it, totally was not the intention, because again, I didn't blend it.
No, I agree. I think it is actually, I think that's one of the best compliments it has towards it, is extremely approachable and yet complex at the same time.
Right.
Correct.
You can search for more there if you know what you're looking for. Exactly.
Yeah. No, I love it.
Back to
no, go ahead.
I was going to bug you earlier about just talking about your different collections. We saw this signature Canongate and now this Oran that we just tried. Can you just maybe put some words around what each of the different collections are for your company?
Sure. So the Perfect Fifth is what we started off with. That was the original brand. That is still the main brand. Unlike a lot of companies, we start off on the very high and top shelf of the space, as opposed to that being just one of our lines. That is who we are, because we try to find and put out the best stuff that we possibly can. Usually that ends up being high end. Canongate was the second. I don't know if you would call it a brand or a brand extension. We're all in house. We don't have a massive team. We don't have focus groups deciding what we call things. Canongate is the name of the street, one of the main streets in Edinburgh that we happen to be staying on. When I was, me and my team, while we were there working on a project, on the Canongate project, and that's how the name came about. That was more for the whiskeys that don't fit within the portfolio of the Perfect Fifth. So they're not well-known distilleries. It's more of that oddball, more of the odd one out. So we came up with, hey, we want to release these, but it doesn't, we can't, our oak barrels, they're beautiful. I love them. They're very expensive to produce.
Yeah. Those
cool.
signature bottles. Those signature bottles are gorgeous. I love the label and everything too. It's just beautiful. So I think you're doing a great job on them.
That label,
even the bottle. The bottles and the thick base. You know what I'm saying?
Cool likes a thick base.
I do like a thick base.
So I love that. I love the base, and I love the cork. I love all of the
the wooden thinner topped, but yet like wide. Yeah.
They're really wide wood cork. That's cool.
When you hold the bottle, you want to feel it. You want to feel the weight of it. You want to set around. That's all of our packaging. We all came up with it together as a family. And you brought up the label on the first bottle. If you could pull it up, let me pull up our website to see if you can actually notice it. But that label took me a year to figure out.
Oh wow!
Talking about
it's beautiful.
So the Oran #1 or what?
No,
or
the Future Collection.
Yeah. Those are nice.
So if you notice, do you see those cuts around our logo, and then on the bottom part, you see those cuts almost in the label?
Yeah. It's almost like a circle around the 5.
Yeah, and then on the bottom part as well, under whiskey.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I see them now. Yeah.
We had to bottle these because, again, whiskey can turn and change in 6 months. We had some really old whiskey that we had to bottle. I found these bottles that I like. I bottled them. What I didn't know is, given the compound curvature of these bottles, it is impossible to put a label on these bottles.
Oh wow! Yeah,
without it like bubbling in the middle,
so
kind of
had to put cuts in them.
It took me an actual year of trying to figure out how do we get these labels on. First, try to print out labels. It didn't work. Right, it would bubble everywhere. Then I found a company. Again, I was 20 years old. I still don't know much, but I really knew nothing about the industry. And I was trying. I went to label manufacturer in the UK. And they said, I sent them the bottle, I sent the label, I said, here's our problem. Can you help us figure this out? They said, yeah, we have some special adhesive. They made the same exact labels without anything. And spoiler alert, it didn't work. So I got to the point where I was calling up. I'm like, who could possibly have a solution to this? Again, I'm not an engineer. I don't really understand the issue. I just know there's an issue here. And I thought it was an adhesive issue. So I'm like, what's the biggest company in this space? I'm like, 3M. I literally called the 3M corporate office, and I told them my problem. I said, do you guys have anything for me? And they put me in touch with a company which we didn't go with, a company that makes, the logo of a car, like like a Toyota or Honda, etc.
Yeah.
Curved metal plate. So this company makes like these metal plates, and they can make it shape it around the bottle as like a negative.
Yeah.
So, which was going to cost us a tremendous amount per label.
Right.
And it just didn't look right. Finally there was a label design and manufacturing company in Napa Valley that had a good reputation that I found. I was living in Miami at the time. I flew out there with my brother Ben. He lives in LA, so he flew. We met there. We drove to Napa. We met with them. Told them our issue. Well, let me preface. Before that, I figured out how to do it. I realized if I took scissors and I just cut all around it, almost like a butterfly cut, it didn't bubble. But again, it kind of looks, a little bit off if you have just cuts all around. I went into this meeting and there was a guy, I believe his name was Mike, older gentleman. I think he's retired by now. And he right away said, why don't you hide it? Instead of trying to figure out, how to minimize it, make it part of the label. So if you notice the bottom part, we tried to make it like wooden slats.
Oh, wow.
So we embraced it. And that's the whole background of it being like an oak barrel. If you look kind of in the texture in the background, it's an oak barrel.
That's cool.
That came about because of these cuts that we had to make so we can get the label onto the bottle and actually release it.
That's cool.
So,
I mean, clearly you figured it out. You've got several releases with this bottle shape. I mean, you've been doing this a while now with the same label, same bottle. So it's working for you.
Well, now we're proud of it. Proud of it. Great story.
Right. It's a good story too. Yeah.
Well, our Oran is a straight bottle.
It's a lot easier.
We are not doing that again.
So out of the signature collection, what's your favorite bottling so far?
Great question.
So
I see a 40-year-old Glenlivet for the record for listeners. There's a Two Sisters 31-year, a Bunnahabhain 28-year, a 42-year Cambit. It just goes on. These killer single casks.
So I would say a lot of people love our Aberlour 30.
Ooh, that's what I was about to say.
Which is an ex-bourbon Aberlour, which is unique.
Really? It is unique for Aberlour, yeah.
I love that whiskey. Because I really am split between bourbon and Scotch, and I hate being asked the question what I prefer because I really enjoy both, and it depends on the month. Right now, we have a project in Kentucky that we're working on, so I've been drinking a lot more American whiskey, a lot more bourbon. I love Cambis. Cambis is a single grain distillery. We released two barrels at 41 and 42.
Cool.
And it's kind of like it's as if bourbon and single malt Scotch had a child. That's what older single grain whiskey. So my favorite was our Cambis 42-year-old.
Nice.
Part of our initial release. That's probably my favorite to date. Although I've tried it, obviously extensively, all of our stuff, and
vintage 1976. That's insane.
So awesome.
Man. Yeah, exactly.
That project in Kentucky though, can you mention a little more about that? Like what's going on? Will that be a future release for the Canongate collection or something?
No, we're building a facility there.
Ooh.
Oh, cool.
So
what part of Kentucky?
Smack in the middle between Louisville and Lexington. Central Kentucky.
So like near Frankfurt?
10 minutes outside of Frankfurt, or 15 minutes.
So when I finally go to Kentucky, I need to put that on my list then for a stop by.
Seriously.
We're obviously the Dreamhead Day One has always been a distillery, although we're not getting into that yet. Kind of our trajectory. We started off with curating. That's what an independent bottler is. We now got into blending, and we're going to expand upon that. So our phase one is we're building a warehouse and a single barrel bottling facility. Obviously for our own stuff, but one of the things that we want to do is be able to offer barrel picks from distilleries all around the world. If we can get tons of barrels in, you can come in instead of when you go into a distillery barrel pick, you have maybe 5 barrels in front of you. You get to choose one out of those 5. You have their standard bottle. They may or may not stick a little, another label on top that says, private selection by whatever, by whoever. And that's that. We wanted to provide and give, whether it's to stores, individuals, whiskey clubs, etc., at a fair price. You can come in, try any whiskey you want, pick a bottle, pick a label, whatever the heck you want, and come and bottle it. That's kind of our vision.
To make it your own thing, the chooser's own bottle, the chooser's own thing.
Whatever you guys
love that.
You come in there, and we also don't want to necessarily, charge an arm and a leg for it. It depends on the whiskey. I've been working I put a lot of time into designing a warehouse, believe it or not.
Nice.
Do you guys know about the two types of warehouses in the bourbon industry?
Yeah,
No.
like
Palletized
masonry and wooden.
Right. So palletized is on pallets stored vertically. Rick houses are like that old school where they roll it in and it's sold horizontally. We did a hybrid. So the downside of a rick house, it has great airflow. I personally think horizontal is a better way to age whiskey, but airflow is the most important piece to it. The problem is it takes a lot of manpower and a lot of time to move a barrel. I mean, have you seen the Buffalo Trace warehouses or the Heaven Hill one? These things hold barrels, and they're manually rolled in. So these things, if you have a barrel 30 barrels deep, and you want to pull a sample from that,
good luck.
Right.
Yeah.
So we designed a warehouse where it's all stored horizontally, plenty of really good ventilation and airspace, but each barrel is directly accessible to the aisle from the forklift. We also still have the height that a rick house has. Cool. So you can come in there and say, I want X, Y, or this barrel or whatever. We can have that down in 5 minutes.
Yeah, it sounds like way less overhead in general. Yeah.
Overhead, but again, taking the quality side and also the logistics side. Effectively, I've had because I've always used third-party warehouses, third-party bottling facilities, etc. All the things that are that have held us back as a company. The time to take samples or the ability. Single barrel bottlings are always complicated. I'm like, I want to try to do it myself. And all the issues that we had, how do we solve those? And that's kind of what we put together. But the vision is, you come in, whether it's an individual or a whiskey club or a bar or store, and we'll have a menu effectively of a few. We have capacity of 20,000 barrels. Not all of those will be available. There'll be some of our own stuff, other brands, etc. But if you can try, if there's 400 barrels and types, forget about barrels, 400 or 100 different types of whiskey, whether it's whiskey from Europe or single malts from the Northwest or a GP bourbon, whatever it may be, from various ages, and you say, hey, I want to try these 10 whiskeys. We'll bring the barrels down. We're going to have a beautiful tasting room. No distillery. It's literally just going to be a facility dedicated to single barrel bottlings and actually tasting. So you come in there and you obviously choose the whiskey, the most important piece, and also choose you want a custom label. Let's figure it out.
Nice.
We're going to have an in-house design team. Same thing with the glass and cork. And the idea is to really come in there, pick a whiskey that you want to enjoy, and put it in your own thing and make your own brand. It doesn't necessarily have to be that you're going to sell it, but it just means that you're coming to make your own thing.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter who you are. You could be a podcast named Chill Filtered to come in and make your own first bottling.
Frankfurt ain't that far. Frankfurt's only 9 hours from me.
Yeah, I would get in my car and drive there right now if we were going to do this thing.
Interesting. I was speaking with one of the heads, someone actually from the city of Frankfurt. I don't recall her exact title, but she had a great statistic, and I don't know if it's true, so I want to throw that out there. She said 60% of America is within a day's drive of central Kentucky.
Makes sense.
Wow. Which is a crazy. Again, I mean, that's why I guess UPS is based there and etc. But
true, yeah,
it is very central
for sure.
So wait, just to make sure, for this facility and all that stuff, it's on a barrel level, right? Like, they choose a barrel and they say, I want that. You give them the whole barrel. Is that right?
Correct. You're coming to buy a whole barrel. Although we will not initially, we probably will have a couple barrels out that you can come and bottle your own bottle of that barrel, and maybe even do a quick blend.
Yeah.
For like a tour and a bottling kind of thing for individual people.
I don't know that we're going to do tours up front. The property itself is 170 acres, so we're going to expand way beyond this. We have plans for distillery, a pot still distillery,
nice,
with a malting facility on site. I mean,
very cool.
We have plans, so we want to go whiskey, so primarily bourbon, but we also are big believers in American single malt, and we do want to go down that road.
Good,
good idea.
But in Kentucky, so that's going to be.
When is that supposed to start?
I was going to say 2026.
We are getting a small still. If purely experimental, we kind of have to sell alcohol on premise. We need to have a distillery, like an actual distillery.
Yeah,
so
makes sense.
Very small still, not open to public, which we are going to have lots of fun on.
Nice. Pure experiments.
Correct.
Yeah.
The distillery side, I mean, who knows? We have our plans. We have, again, we've gone through the motions. It's, it all comes down to our ability to get the, phase 1 opened up. I would hope in 2 years, within 2 years or so. The first phase that we're referring to is we hope to be open by Q3 of next year or 2024.
Wow, that's awesome.
Soon.
Well, we hope to visit.
Now I know when to plan my trip. Yeah.
Yeah, seriously.
The exciting part is to have an idea of, hey, let's bottle this barrel and actually be able to go that day and going to bottle it, as opposed to sending out an email to somebody and getting scheduled in 3 months. And
exactly. Yeah.
That's super cool. And I love that you're doing not just bourbon, you're doing also. So are you going to be able to do any Scotch there too?
I wish.
Okay, cool. Is that a legal thing?
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
Scotch has to be distilled, matured, and bottled in Scotland.
And bottled. That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, if we, in theory,
if you brought in the barrels, it would disqualify it as well. So,
but it's also illegal to take the barrels out unbottled. So it's they're
you can do nothing
SWA,
but bottle
baby.
it in Scotland.
I mean, look, at the end of the day, I'm sure if you wanted to sneak some barrels out, you probably could.
Yeah. Obviously, you're aging bourbon in Scotland and you're already breaking laws. So
yeah, right.
No, that's super cool. So, Karl, tell us as we kind of close up, where can our listeners find anything from the Perfect Fifth?
So we just started this month. We just started selling on our, you can buy it on our website. I'm sure you guys all know how that process works. Fulfilled through one of our partners, our retail partners. But you can also find it in California, New York, New Jersey, our primary distribution locations, and obviously international. So whether it's, the K&L wines in California, a lot of the big the big whiskey retailers.
Yeah.
So we're not in Total Wines or Bevmo, but we are in the, whether it's them or the various guys in New York. You can Google it and you can find it, but we also sell on our website as well now. And that's a newer thing. And that's something that's taken a lot of my attention on, because now now you have to, because when you have a whiskey company, when you have a whiskey brand, you hyper focus on every small aspect, every letter that goes on the label. You focus on. Now I have to actually think about, even though we're not the ones sending it out, it's under our name. Someone getting a pack, getting a bottle. So if someone's buying, our Glenlivet 40-year-old, which is not a cheap bottle by any means, the process has to be perfect. So we just started that, and that's also exciting for us.
Seriously, that's a big step.
Yeah,
we were very hesitant at first because we felt that we didn't want to compete with our retailers, and we didn't want to. We wanted to focus on what we were good at. But what I started getting feedback is, if I'm going to buy such and such bottle, I want to buy it from the source. I want to feel
totally.
There's, you're buying a car, you want to buy it from the dealership that, or from that brand. So that's what kind of came in. But I held out for 2 years. So I was proud of that.
Nice. No, that's great. So listeners, check it out at theperfectfifth.com. And they have a shop. If you see one of their tabs as shop. So Karl, thank you so much. This has been great. I look forward to not only if you ever want to come back on, let us know, but also, and if you have any big releases you want to rep, let us know. But I also look forward to seeing this company grow quite a bit, because I think you have some great ideas, and I think that even this location out in Kentucky, I think this is a great idea. So
thank you. Yeah, I mean, I've been working on that for the better part of a year now.
That's awesome.
It's actually June of last year is when I first got into it. But yeah, we're excited by it, and we're excited to. The industry is such a mystery to a lot of people. The process. That's part of why this podcast exists, is to show people what it's like. What is behind the bottle.
Yeah.
But actually, be able to really, people love that. People love going in and making your own whiskey or doing your own thing, and it really it does well, and it's how, honestly, I think the best whiskey I've ever had is a whiskey that I've put together and I've produced and I've put my blood sweat into, and that's just the way it is going to be, and that's what whiskey is. So
for sure,
I love that. But we're excited. I'm very excited by that.
That's awesome. No, I agree. I think it's great stuff, and surprisingly, seems like very simple ideas that you're putting out, but surprisingly revolutionary at the same time. So
Right.
yeah.
Revolutionary is a big word, but
especially in a long industry such as distilling.
This industry has been around for a very long time.
Yeah, at least 1,000 years. Yeah,
correct. Minus like what is it? In the earlier part of the 20th century, we don't like to talk about, but
yeah, we get rid of that part. Yeah,
definitely not revolutionary, but try to do a different thing here and there. And, it's also kind of fun.
Yeah,
for sure.
No, I'm glad you're having a good time too. I think that makes it all worth it. So, well, basically, I think we'll close out here. But I hope our listeners can check out theperfectfifth.com and check out what they're putting out. There are some. I mean, basically, especially if you're a Scotch enjoyer, this is an independent bottling kind of thing that like is up there. I mean, with some of these bottles I'm seeing, like up there with Mossburn, heck, up there with like Alexander Murray, and up there with some of the bigger ones that have been around for a while. So far as I'm seeing, this is good stuff, and especially the single cast stuff. Try out the Oran. If you can find on their website. I believe it's about $190 for a bottle of that. But really cool stuff they're putting out, and I hope our listeners will check them out.
Yeah, and I hope that I can get my hands on that. Get my hands on that Heaven Hill 14-year, partially aged in Scotland that's coming out in a couple of weeks. That sounds good.
I hope I get my hands on an Aberlour 30-year single malt. But most of all, listeners, I hope that our love of whiskey lifted your spirits.